everyone. Welcome to the Amplitude of Tech podcast. I'm Shawn, Chief Marketing Officer of Amplix. Today I had a great conversation with Mike Zinne from Quiq. Mike's got 3 different titles or something, so I'm not going to try to remember them off the top of my head, but super interesting guy. And we had a really cool conversation that's different for this podcast. We went through what are the top mistakes that people are making when they try to adopt AI in their contact center. So this is a good one. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. All right, Mike Zinne, welcome to the Amplitude of Tech podcast.
Thanks, Shawn. It's great to be here.
And great to have you. This is our third go trying to start this thing. We've had some technical difficulties. So let's see if we can get this one off the ground. Why don't you take a minute or two and tell everyone who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Shawn. I am our Chief Revenue and Experience Officer here at Quiq. And Quiq is an AI agent company for customer journeys. So we support AI agents across all of customer journeys, mostly working with companies that are selling to large volumes of consumers. And we've got some great large companies like Progressive Leasing and ICU Medical and those types of folks that have helped support us. And yeah, we're super excited to be here.
Awesome. So we're going to do this episode a little bit differently. Usually the conversation is just kind of directionally. We've got a topic and we see where the conversation goes. But this time I'm going to put some guardrails around you, and we're going to have a conversation about what are the most common mistakes that people are making when they deploy AI in the contact center or in their customer experience. So you and I had a conversation a little bit before this, and I recorded some of those mistakes that we discussed, and I'm just going to start walking through the mistakes and have you provide your commentary on them. Okay.
Yeah, it sounds great.
All right, cool. So mistake number 1, not going far enough and not doing enough. Now that sounds counterintuitive to me because a lot of the conversations that I've had with AI experts in the industry, the advice that they'll give is start small, start specific. So you seem to be going against the grain here. What do you mean by that exactly?
Great question. And I don't know if I'm going completely against the grain or putting a little more definition to it, but I think what we see with customers is this willingness to certainly control risk and wanting to control risk and not wanting to expose AI to all of the elements of their business and have it speak to customers with all of the capabilities that it could potentially speak with to control that risk. Very similar to what you would do with a new agent that you put on the phone. But what I always encourage customers to do is give it enough ability and capability, very similar to how you would give an agent that's starting out, to make sure that it can solve some customer problems so that you don't create this frustration of customer problems. Sometimes companies will just want to start with the FAQs on their website, for example. And oftentimes that just isn't enough to give a good enough agentic experience to that consumer that it really expects more from that AI agent. To be able to process things like, returns or check an order status or, tell me when my flight is or, be able to, let me know if I can check a bag. So those are the types of things that we'll encourage customers to do. And then we'll talk a lot about, there is capabilities to make sure that the AI agent doesn't go off the rails and doesn't say things that will hurt your brand or doesn't say things that it isn't, allowed to say. And so we'll put those guardrails in place and make sure that you've got that risk controlled. But oftentimes we're encouraging customers to do just a little bit more than they tend to start out with in their initial thoughts. And that's provided a lot of value for those companies that do that.
Now, if they're going to do that, it probably opens the door to more dependencies, integrations, need for data to be ready. So what's the right effective dose of going further? How do you know how to right size this?
Yeah, good question. Oftentimes what I'll take it back to is starting to map some of those customer journeys that we as service and sales folks are always interested in doing. What is that journey that the customer is going through to get products or services from your company? And starting to think about what are those, which parts of those journeys are most valuable? And then how do we enable those journeys? And so, for example, a returns process, that journey is going to come with a customer, having a conversation with an AI agent, wanting to process a return is going to need, and that agent's going to need information like, what are you trying to return? Maybe potentially what was that order number, who you are for sure, right? Like, I'm Mike Zinne and this is the type of thing that I order. And then it's going to need, the ability to process that return, meaning does it have the policy to support that return? Uh, is that return within policy? And then, how do I fulfill that return? Do I need to print a shipping label? Do I need to give them directions to a facility for them to take that order to? Do I need to give them the closest store? So those are all capabilities that require data or data access. And so we would map those journeys to those capabilities that are required to execute that journey. And then we're going to talk with the technical folks at a company and see what APIs are available to support those capabilities. And oftentimes those APIs are available for some of those very general types of or high volume types of inquiries like a return. And then it's a matter of how do we expose that to the AI agent. There is sometimes requirements to transform data. So you may have a large PDF that describes a detailed technical specification of a product, for example, or a policy. And oftentimes what we'll do is then help transform that data. And we have some data transformation capabilities within the product that gives us the ability to do that inside of our product. But we may also consult with the customer on data sources that they have available to be able to support it. So what I love to do is map those journeys, understand the value of executing those journeys. So look at the volume of those journeys and then say, okay, what technical access do I need to have to support those journeys? And then once I've defined that, now I know the level of effort to accomplish the integration required to expose the AI agent to enough data and information to execute that journey. And now I can start stack ranking that and putting that into a series of phases within a project. And so, yeah, you'll start with what gives me the most valuable and is the easiest to accomplish. And then you'll dive into sort of less value, harder to accomplish types of use cases and journeys. And when we've done that with customers, we found that actually, their data is probably in a little bit better shape than they think it is, and they have a little bit more access. But there is some nuances to activity that you then have got to go work with a customer and work with an IT organization to potentially create those APIs or to create those integrations to get the right level of data and access. And we'll just put those into a future phase. So that's how I've approached it, and we made a lot of customers successful in approaching it that way.
So what you're saying is you're going to take a bigger swing by not focusing on a discrete task, but more a discrete workflow or specific journey, right?
You got it. Exactly right. Yeah.
Got it.
And take that customer view. So how am I serving that consumer and making sure that I'm giving that, the agent the access to serve that consumer. And then, starting with that and then looking at the technology behind it, as opposed to looking at an entire technology stack and trying to sort of pick out what access I might need.
So that's pretty much mistake number 2 is leading with technology and not the customer journey in mind. So I think you probably said a lot towards that effect, but why don't you just address that one head on?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so starting to map those journeys out, and then also another aspect of that is layering on the different channels. So a return process over the phone may be different than a return process over messaging or web chat, for example. So starting to layer in those different different channels as well as the different journeys and use cases that support those journeys. So we tend to start focusing there and start building out those more comprehensive plans based on that consumer experience that we want to drive for our customers and in consultation with them, and then backing that into more of a technology conversation. And yeah, I see a lot of customers that, they'll start the conversation with, well, let's go look at my data sources, and we'll tend to try to get them to pump the brakes a little bit and start looking at those experiences and those journeys they want to drive for their customers, and then going and doing a technical workshop next.
There's a guy named Simon Sinek. Have you ever heard that name?
The name sounds familiar, but I can't place it.
He's like one of these social media marketing gurus. I don't mean specifically marketing on social media. I mean, he's a marketing guru who's on social media quite a bit. That's how he's gotten famous, writing books, whatever. I hate the guy, and it's nothing personal. It's just he made my life miserable because he came out with this thing what's your why?
Mm.
And that kind of made it out into the world. And so when I ran a branding agency and I had brand strategy projects, I would have clients always saying, well, what's my why?
What's my
And,
why?
it's just, it got a little annoying to me, but it's actually a really great question.
Hmm.
I think that that's one of the things that sometimes gets missed when we're talking about any kind of technology. Really, is what's the reason behind deploying this
That's right.
technology? And in this context, it's the user journey or the customer experience, and it's if you're not paying attention to that and keeping that as your north star as you go through these projects, then you tend to go off the rails a little bit and focus maybe on the wrong things.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I think that is the premise behind the concept here, and the why is like we want to be able to serve the customer in the least amount of effort possible for them, and then the best way possible, and so having that lens on the customer effort and how they execute that in a very effortless way with your brand is tends to be the why for most of our customers, uh, and also great drives a great customer experience for their customers, and so that's why we tend to focus on that journey exercise as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, great
I
point.
think that leads us really well into mistake number three, which is you get focused on the wrong metrics. So we talked about
Mm,
getting focused on the technology, but sometimes you go into these projects with unrealistic or misaligned goals because you're thinking about something specific like containment rates, right? So
mhm.
talk to me about how do you manage to the metrics without letting the metrics drive the project?
Yeah, good question. We probably all read the article of the company that was going to, get rid of all of their customer service agents and completely replace it by AI and contain 100% of their conversations and resolve them. And I think that's a good example of an extreme example of letting the metric lead the project versus creating a project, then understanding what value that project's going to drive and backing into the appropriate metrics to support that. I think there is containment and there is sort of true resolution and the ability to sort of get to that sort of true resolution can be different than containment. It's sometimes hard to understand, did we truly solve that customer's problem in a resolved phase, or did they just get frustrated and leave? And I think that's where AI and having tools to support the conversational analysis of those conversations that are both happening with AI and with humans is really important, and continuing to review those conversations and then tune both your process, your procedures, maybe some of the technical infrastructure and data access that we have to really drive to that, kind of true resolution versus just a containment rate. We've measured CSAT for customers. I think that's a reasonable sort of expectation of measurement is measuring some level of success with the agent and the AI agent, both from a sort of explicit and implicit sort of perspective. And then I think one of the things that people often don't think of when they're starting to talk and think about the metrics that may drive success for a company and in a project is, am I better informing the agent, the human agent, when it does get to a human? So can I take the context of the conversation, summarize it for that human, give them the ability to read and easily consume the initial conversation that customer has had with AI, and then pick it up from there, right? When it gets escalated to me as a human, that's going to create a lot more efficiency in the experience for that customer. It's also going to create a lot more efficiency for that contact center as well, because that human agent is going to have to spend less time with that particular customer. Is going to give them a better quality response as well. So you have to, those are kind of the three, really big key metrics that we see around resolution and containment, CSAT, the ability to, affect the handle time of a human led engagement. And those are all really great metrics to sort of look at as far as, how to, determine the success of your AI agent, project. The other thing we're starting to bleed into a little bit too more is just, how do we drive additional sales and revenue inside of organizations, right? So, can I flip returns to exchanges? Can I help, with product accompaniment? Can I help with, store associates, right? Can an AI agent assist a caller that's calling a specific store and being able to sort of offer, products and inventory potentially within that store that then doesn't distract the store agent from having to answer that call. So, but ultimately can complete a sale. So we're starting to see the customer and sales world, bleed together, quite a bit. I've been in customer service for 26 years, and the utopia has always been how do you turn your contact center into a revenue center? And I think we've always strived to do that, and there's been certain elements of that that's been true. But now with AI, it's starting to really blur those lines between creating a revenue experience inside of that service experience and vice versa. So I think those are also great measurements to execute as well.
Yeah, I want to dive a little bit deeper in a couple of the areas that you spoke
Yeah.
about. Let's start with some of the metrics that you said we should track, right? So starting with CSAT, how good of an indicator is CSAT actually? It's
Mhm.
probably not great on its own, but contextually, because I always feel like there's selection bias in any kind of survey
Sure.
really that you're doing, because the people that are really pissed off at you are probably going to respond, and the people that are really happy with you, they will probably respond as well. But you're missing that middle segment, and that middle
Yeah.
segment, if you follow the regular bell curve distribution, is going to be 80% of the people that you're engaging with, right? So is it
Mhm.
potentially misleading, and how does it fit into the big picture?
Yeah, good question. I would tell you that it is misleading in a lot of the ways that you talked about in the past, where we've had a customer that we've asked them for a survey, and it's still important to do that. I think you get some good information from it. The details and the comments are really important. The trends seem to be, important, but you need to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. I think the other thing that we've been doing is a lot of using AI to say what is the satisfaction level of this particular consumer. How would you rate them? And that will take, a large volume of conversations and being able to sort of rate the customer satisfaction inside of those conversations, and then give you directional elements of, hey, tell me how I could, go drive CSAT in a different way, in this particular set of conversations, and it'll give you ideas on how to do that. So there's a great AI use case that I think, provides a level of CSAT information that's better now than, the sort of give me a thumbs up, give me a thumbs down, and enter some comments that yeah, drives certainly more frustrated, sets of feedback, or more positive sets of feedback, and, kind of misses that middle bit. So, we encourage customers to both use the sort of, ask the customer, but then also let's take those conversations and analyze them, and then, provide them with the level of information of what's driving successful outcomes for customers, and then use that to drive what value we may add, or what capabilities we may add to the AI agent to increase that capability with inside of that experience.
How do you account for in something like handle times, for example? Your handle times might be going up, but your resolution might be going up along with it,
Yeah,
or your handle
yeah,
times might be going up because you have deflected some easy transactional type of calls that people are reaching out about, what's simple things, right? Status of an order. You're deflecting that out of the contact center and into the AI. So your agents are actually getting the more complex issues that can't be handled by AI.
yeah. No, it's a good point. Handle time's a hard one. It because you've got a lot of when you start introducing AI agents to it, you've got a lot of elements that are poking at your handle time that give you a little bit of diversity in how you go understand, exactly where that handle time is going to be. And you talked about a few of them, right? Like, we're going to start eliminating more and more of those large, or those easy questions. I'll put it in air quotes, because I think even some of the complex ones are becoming easier for AI to handle. And that's going to drive some agent handle time up very, very clearly. And we saw that back in the self-service days, when you started putting more and more capability into knowledge bases and things like that, or it increased handle time. I think the on the flip side of that coin, you've also got this ability to take a conversation with an AI agent a long ways down the path before even that complex conversation comes to a human agent. And so some of your handle time may actually decrease on some of the more complex types of questions, because you're able to get to a certain level of understanding before a human even gets involved. And so that can end up, having a counter pull on that string, as far as reducing some of the handle time. I think, again, it's looking at the specific calls and those call types, and having some assumptions about, how that's going to affect a handle time. Being really good about baselining that before, so that you can really understand the after. I think, like, one of the things I love to start with in projects is like, well, how are we going to measure this? And are we ensuring that those baselines exist for that measurement? Because, frankly, I've had some projects where you get, 3, 4, 5 months after the project, you're going back and looking at metrics and realizing you never baseline the same metric, and so it's hard to determine some of the value that you've created. So really having a thoughtful conversation about that, aligning it to call types, I think is a really important thing to go do, and then you know building some assumptions around it, and then pressure testing those assumptions with careful watching of the data as it's going through those early stages of production is an important component as well.
There are some other metrics of brand loyalty that I don't often hear come up in the contact center or customer experience
hmm
context. One of them being net promoter score. Is that something that in itself probably isn't the answer, but can it add a little bit of context?
Yeah, I mean, it can add some nuance. It depends upon how you use it. I think, net promoter score oftentimes can be, a substitute of CSAT, and you kind of run into all the elements that we talked about with CSAT. I think you've got to really understand exactly kind of where you're using it and how you're using it, and, make sure it just isn't a different flavor of CSAT. But it can be effective. It can be effective. Yeah.
And what
Especially in
about
the
like,
buying cycle.
right? What
Yeah.
about customer effort score?
Yeah. I love customer effort score. And I think it has an absolute great, fantastic place to play, and with AI agents, and if you're using customer effort to manage your journeys, I think it's a great sort of you should have an assumption that the effort is going to get easier and more seamless for customers, especially if you're introducing a multimodal and multi-channel concept. And what I mean by multimodal is I may be on the phone with an agent or with an AI agent, and that AI agent is also able to send me some text messages like, "Oh, you want to exchange your shirt? Maybe I can send you some suggestions of the different types of styles that you could exchange onto your phone." Right now, I've got a multimodal experience, and starting to cover a number of different experiences, and so that's significantly reducing the effort of oh, let me send you a email with a link in that you now got to go log into your email and go click into, and then maybe you can kind of see the sort of style of shirt I want to go subscribe to you. So starting to think about how you can reduce those efforts, especially in a multimodal multi channel sort of concept. Super awesome. I love customer effort score. Huge believer.
There are some business indicators that in marketing we can use for brand loyalty. One of them would be consecutive repeat rate. So that
hmm
is, somebody buys something from you, makes a purchase, and then on their next immediate visit, they make another purchase within that same category. That's an indicator of propensity to buy
Yeah.
or future market share. There's obviously customer retention rate is going to be a big
hmm
one. And then a customer lifetime value is another potential one. What do you think of those three? And are there any others that I'm missing before we move on?
Yeah, good ones. I think those are all applicable. I think average shopping cart value is to on the e-commerce side, really good one. Can we accessorize those and accompany the product purchase as they're going through a product purchase cycle is a good one to use. But yeah, I think all of those kind of brand loyalty, revenue generation measures, really important in how you're thinking about your AI measurement, AI experience.
Absolutely. So moving on to the next mistake that people make is siloed channel deployments. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I think and I explained a little bit about it, but the opportunity to use the same AI agent across multiple different channels is one of the things that the technology nowadays affords us. And that means I'm going to drive a very similar sort of experience and an integrated experience for those customers. Across those channels. So I gave the example of a phone experience where, perhaps you're trying to purchase something, or maybe you're trying to change a flight, for example, and now I can message you with the flight change options versus the AI agent or even a human agent reading those message those options out. And it's like, oh, I forgot what was the first one again. And so creating that multi-channel, multimodal experience. And using AI to support it is a really great opportunity for companies nowadays with the technology that's out there. I would say the efficiency that you need to create though when you're doing that is you need to have that AI agent or that system have the access to all those different channels. And I'll see companies that'll research these things and try to do channel dependent or channel independent deployments. And I think that's a mistake. I think that's creating a disjointed experience in what you're able to offer to those customers. You're not able to sort of tightly integrate them into a multimodal type of an experience. And again, back to the kind of customer effort score, you're just going to increase effort for those companies and those customers. You're also going to increase effort for yourselves because you're going to have, different, conversations occurring in different places. You're going to have, multiple different, capabilities that you're going to have to tune and automate. And integrate. And so, I think the opportunity with the technology today is to, go after all those channels and expose that AI agent to all those channels. Now, there are nuances in channels that you're going to have to tune for. I can return a lot more information to the screen than I can have an AI agent read out in voice. A customer is going to wait for a lot of data to be returned to the screen a little more patiently than they're going to wait for the AI agent to return information on the phone. It's just the nature of how humans work, and an AI agent in messaging isn't going to get interrupted by background noise, but a voice AI agent may get interrupted by background noise. So you're going to have to, account for that. So there's channel nuances that you certainly have to account for and you have to be good at, and you have to have the right technology for. But the underlying infrastructure and how those things respond and how they're integrated together, I think is super.
It's a very little thing that you just mentioned there, but I think it's funny that, we talk about how customers would be willing to wait a little bit longer if they're talking to a human being versus, with an AI agent. So, I'm using Claude Enterprise now for work. I'm part
Hmm.
of the beta group. And when I do strategy work, I have a process that I've been doing for 12 years, and it's a very manual process. It's creating a bunch of data via stakeholder interviews and research and whatever. It comes from all these different places. And then I have a process by which I aggregate that data and look for commonalities and themes in that data. And so this could take days and days and
Hmm.
days of focused time. So now I can use Claude and I can put all these inputs in there, and then it will do a lot of that manual work for me. And what would take me days now takes minutes. But as I sit there and see that little thing saying thinking while I'm waiting for the answer, and 45 seconds might go by and I'm already getting angry at how long it's
Hmm.
taking, right? So, the Overton window of our attention spans has shifted so much, and it continues to shift, and our expectations of enterprises is starting to shift with it.
It is, yeah. No, it's an interesting kind of social phenomena that's occurring, and it makes a little bit of sense too, right? Like, I mean, we're really tuned to the speed and pace of websites, and if you remember back when there was varying degrees of speed you had with it, with your internet connection, like you would get these sort of very frustrating long turns, and now that's become very fast. And then you think about the amount of data we're asking AI to churn through nowadays, like it's going to take a second. And that, our patience is good on video, but and or on digital, but patience is very thin on the phone, especially in a customer service environment. Like very typically a lot of customers, the last thing they're going to do is pick up the phone. And so there's a level of frustration where it's got to be super snappy. It just has to be. And again, there are ways to do that. And there are expectations of technology that are different than the expectations of how a human may interact. It's okay for a human to say, let me look that up for you. But when an AI agent says that, there's a little bit less patience. So we're trying to, accommodate all of these, kind of social phenomena that are occurring in this space. And I've been doing a nice job of it, but it's been an interesting exploration of how humans interact with AI agents and how that's evolving.
Yeah, page load speed is a key metric for
Hmm.
marketers in our digital experience. And you can see it in the data of how quickly people will drop off. It's if they have to wait more than milliseconds for that page to load, they'll bounce. And it
Totally.
takes them more time to go back to where they found you to Google and look through other results and then click on another website than it would to
Hmm.
sit there and wait, but they will bounce anyway. It's
Totally.
crazy.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's exactly right. Yeah.
but so back to what you were saying before, I just want to talk briefly about the cost of having unnecessary complexity in the
Sure.
way that you're architecting these solutions. And then
Yeah.
what is the opportunity cost of having data or workflows living in different silos?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the complexity of cost is obviously having to manage both the integration aspects, the data aspects of it, the tuning and configuration of the API or the agents, the AI agents, and then, also just the impact on the customer effort to have to channel switch and have to, sort of re-explain themselves in a different channel in a different way. the potential of losing context of a conversation. Uh, these are all sort of examples of experiences for that customer that's going to increase the effort and increase the cost, and complexity for you all, for the customer as well in the work that they have to do to integrate all of these solutions and manage them and monitor them, as well as the experience that's going to create more, potential tickets and human conversations, less containment, less full resolution, lower CSAT. All those things drive cost, some more explicitly than others. And so that's where your sort of, cost element comes in, and the efficiency of being able to see and capture all those conversations drive a great, experience for a customer in a much different channels, and, potentially integrating those two channels together. Like that's great. That's going to create a great experience for them. It's going to create a ton of efficiency for the business, which should equal, a larger ROI. And we do see, very significant, uh, returns on investments, as well as lowering of, very, specific unit economics within a business of the cost of a call, or the cost of an interaction, or, the amount of tickets that, occur before an order is, consumed or delivered, or a service is consumed or delivered, or, the amount of conversations that have to occur versus before a sale occurs. So, those types of very, clear, cost or revenue drivers, and the sort of return that you can put inside of some of these models and these success stories is just really fantastic if you're thinking through well enough how to create that experience, and not, to your point, overdo it, right? Like, you don't want to have a whole bunch of complexity in your environment. We all got, more tech tools than we know what to do with anymore. And so, adding more complexity to that environment when it's not necessary is just not something you want to do from a cost or experience perspective for your.
I think complexity can sometimes lead to fragility of the system as
Oh,
well.
100% too. Yeah, yeah. Great point. Great point. Yeah, it absolutely can. If you're updating at one place and you've got to go update it in two or three others, by nature, that's just gonna add a level of risk to your business and complexity and costs and all the elements you don't want to have in your business, for sure. Yeah, good point.
So next mistake is data readiness paralysis.
Yes, I like that one. Yeah, we've worked with a number of customers that, have tried to get their data AI perfect, or they'll say, Mike, I'll love to do that use case, but my data isn't AI ready. And I think, being able to look for solutions that can help you with that data readiness, that data transformation, maybe even potentially at the time of execution, is important. And listen, we all, deal and work with large scale enterprises that, they have data problems. They always have. And, those data problems rarely get cleaned up. And if they do, it's a very, very long project to go get them done. And so you have to really be thoughtful and really make sure that your technology can support some of those data enrichment or data management types of activities, so that it can create an effective AI agent. And so I think back to where we started the call and just thinking through some of those customer journeys. And then when we do get to that tech portion, we'll be able to talk you through sort of how your data looks today, and then how we can help support some of that transformation to be able to, make it accessible to the AI agent, and, how that transformation can be executed through some of our technology. So, yeah, I love to make sure that that is not the first thing we talk about, but it's more led in the conversation of, hey, when we're going to go enable this journey, what is the output of this particular API or this particular system? And then how can we transform that to make it accessible to the AI agent, so that it can be informative and effective for the customer that it's going to work.
I sometimes feel like this conversation gets circular because I've heard
Hmm.
so many people say, you have to, data readiness, it's so important. You have to get your data ready before you do anything. Bad
Yeah,
data means bad AI. But then I hear so many people saying, don't wait to have good data. You need to get into the game
yeah,
here, and don't get paralysis by analysis. And so
yeah,
what is the right line here? Like,
yeah. It's a good question.
how do you figure this out?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it is hard. Like, we've worked with customers where, they have three return policies on their, website in various different forms and places. And, the AI agent says, well, you've got three different ones here that, you all say are good. Like, which one is it? And you know how this gets built over time. Like, you have these things that conflict with each other, and that's an important element of, understanding the specific data that is happening within a business and within those specific use cases. And And again, there is, I don't want to, sort of jump on the podcast and say you're never going to have to change anything with data. That just isn't always going to be true. But there are tools and capabilities now, again using AI, where you can say, hey, listen, like tell me if I've got conflicting knowledge out there, so I can go resolve some of that knowledge. Tell me how do I have a customer record problem. But in most cases, human agents are using systems to go look up information, and if those humans can process what's right and what's wrong, it's likely the AI agent can process what's right and what's wrong. And so that's why I say, like, a lot of companies will say, well, my data isn't AI ready. And we want to go back to that sort of use case and really understand, well, how are your human agents making sense of it? And now there may be something where it's just like, that our human agents have been in our contact center for 20 years and they know that there's a bunch of duplicate information in this area, and they just resolve it. And in that particular case, that may be something that we just have to escalate to an agent, and they're just going to have to resolve it. And so there are nuances like that, but I would say for the most part, in a lot of the high volume call drivers that we see within customers, you're going to be able to go make sense of most of that data, and we're going to be able to give really good direction of elements to sort of clean up, if you will, the areas that may be duplicative or confusing.
That's a good, useful heuristic. And I'm going to use the return policy as an example, because you said if a human can figure it out, then the AI can probably figure it out. So if you had 3 return policies, one was on your website, one was in your FAQ or whatever, your knowledge base, and then one was, someplace else, whatever, but the AI was trained on all 3, the same way that a human could look at all 3 and see if they were saying basically the same thing, but just different wording. Or if, let's say, one policy said you've got 30 days, the other said 30 days with a receipt, a human being would be able to figure out that the answer is probably 30 days with a receipt. And so the AI would figure that as well. But if one says 30 days, one says 45 days, and one says 90 days, the human won't know what the right answer is. The AI won't know what the right answer is.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it can be as simple as that. And sometimes the human agents have these policy documents that are policy and procedure documents that are as important. And they may have agency with them, right? Like, for a high volume customer, this, maybe we give them a 35-day return policy instead of a 30-day return policy. And so, yeah, oftentimes they'll know the source of truth and where it is. And so, that's how you'll resolve it. Other times, we're exposing this. Hey, do you know that you have 3 return? Oh gosh, I didn't know that I had 3 return policies. I got to go clean that up, and the company will go clean it up. So, yeah, it just kind of depends upon the use case and what the data is and what's happening within the data. Sometimes you also have some manuals and things like that for high volume tech, detailed technical sorts of manuals and things like that can get outdated and have older information. And you got to figure out how to deal with that as well. So yeah, it just, there's a ton of nuances there, but I'd say generally in my experience, you can work through those nuances and come up with a record of truth. And if you can't, then that's something that goes on the list to sort of, make an adjustment to, or make more specificity to. But those tend to be kind of below the line of the high volume kind of call drivers and transactions that are going to be within your contact center, within your sales delivery process. And so those are things that you can move into kind of more of a phase 2 type of a project where it does take a little bit more effort.
Sure.
Yeah.
I want to move on to stakeholder and expectation management. So what are the mistakes that people make here?
Yeah, good question. I think AI projects have a lot of exposure within organizations. Is oftentimes board level exposure within organizations, and with that level of exposure comes a lot of constituents that are involved in the project. You also, by the nature of it, have technical technical resources that are responsible for executing technical components. You've got legal resources that are controlling risk. You've got, the contact center operations team that's operating, a policy and procedure. You may have brand and marketing elements that are important, or product owners that are important, that want to understand the tone and the personality of the AI agent. So you have a lot of constituents. I think this is where thoughtful project and program management, really controlling the communication and executing the communication and transparency of of managing that project across all of those constituents is super important. So I think, the best projects that we have a project and program manager at the customer side that's helping us through sort of all of these different constituencies, and then being able to articulate, the things they care about. Like, a brand or product sort of division is going to care more about tone, and the type of voice that they have and the experience the customer is going to have. The IT organization is going to care a lot more about the integration and the data security and the data complexity and data management that you have to do. So just understanding the constituencies as well and what they care about, and then being able to articulate the need, or the how we're executing that portion of the project that they care about. So just being really thoughtful about how you manage that project, and keeping communication high. I think these projects are complex because of the exposure of the project inside of the organization and the amount of different divisions and constituents that they have. And it's new, right? It's novel, right? Like, so people are just trying to learn how to do these projects, and so being able to educate them as you're going through the process, even if they're parachuting in for a minute to understand the status, also a super important thing to think about.
What about board level expectations, in the sense that, we were talking about what are the right metrics before? So as these metrics are getting reported at a board level, let's say your handle time is going up, and that might seem like it's going the wrong way.
Mhm.
Could you have gone into that project explaining to the board that that could be a byproduct and that actually might be a good
Right.
indicator?
Yeah, great point. Yeah, I mean, I think back to the KPI conversation, what to expect, setting expectations appropriately. Like, these may be good indicators. Being thoughtful about the model and continuing to review the model. I think, oftentimes, the board's looking for efficiency or revenue gains. And so, making sure that you're modeling, the level of efficiency, and documenting the assumptions to get to that level of efficiency, and then constantly reviewing it, constantly reviewing conversations to tune to that level of efficiency. I think those are really important sort of aspects of these projects, and managing them, and controlling expectations across the organization, and also communicating success. Like, I don't think there's enough celebration of success in some of these projects as well. The news likes to write about all the failures in the world because it I don't know, it sells clicks, but there's a lot of success out there too, and a lot of people doing some really great things to drive a really great customer experience. Being able to celebrate those successes is really important.
Yeah, the stories that you see tend to be the stories that are outliers, and that's why they're interesting and getting written
That's
about.
right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, I wonder, speaking about stakeholders, like customers are obviously stakeholders too. So
Yeah.
how do you set the right expectations with them as they're about to start engaging with your customer experience?
Yeah, great question. Especially because AI is so new. The experiences of traditional chatbots in the NLP space, where they were basically just an IVR on the web, which was hey, there's three different things you could select from, pick one, pick next. But those were tended to be more frustrating experiences, obviously, than the world we live in today with AI, where it's how can I help you, and converse with this thing like an agent. I think there's some promotion that you can do with customers to promote that, hey, this is coming out, and this is going to be a great thing for you, and here's how to interact with it, like in a very quick and sharp way. And not make it intimidating. I think there's a balance of understanding and covering your risk of saying, hey, this is an AI agent, but don't put pages and pages of documentation in front of the customer before they can ask their question. So there's some little just kind of nuances like that, where you can make it a part of your brand, make it a part of the interaction that customer's having, have a little fun with it. We have a lot of companies that name it, we give it a little icon, give it some personality. You can create that personality and persona inside of the organization, and and those are super fun things to go do too. So I think there's just a lot of I think there's more promotion, frankly, that companies can do about these experiences being out there for customers, and a little bit of education for customers on how to use them and how to interact with them, because they are so new and because what existed in the past didn't have that great of an experience. I think there's some opportunity to do that, and we see some great companies that are doing those types of
I
things.
feel like just simply starting off an interaction with, hey, I'm an AI agent. I'm pretty good at doing stuff. You should give it a try and ask me questions, but don't worry, I'll get you to a human if you really feel like you need it. That might be a
Yeah.
good step in the right
Yeah,
direction.
that's a that's a great way to start it too. I love that. Yeah, yeah, exactly right. Like setting the expectation right that it's, and it's not the end. Yeah, there's always the, I'm super afraid of being stuck in, this loop, and this, we do see some of these companies where you start out and, the first thing they say is agent. And so you're wanting to educate them just a little bit more. Yes, we're happy to get you to an agent, but if you give me just a little bit of information, I may be able to help you. Some of those sorts of things are just to start. But this is also one of those things, Shawn, and I don't know if you've seen it, but as the market and consumers start to consume these things from different folks, it's becoming more and more a part of kind of the regular interaction, and ultimately going to move from one of these things that is an experience that you have to educate them on to something that's an expectation. And so that was that's one of the kind of fun things as we watch this space and as we watch the markets mature and the technology mature. It's been a nice sort of outcome of what's happening in the in the uh, in the thread.
I
Yeah,
think when this is done right, it's done with the outcome in mind of improving the customer experience and
that's
removing
right.
friction from those interactions. And that can be a brand pillar. That can be
Yeah,
something that is a messaging point for a brand. And so marketing needs to integrate service and technology led service into the brand messaging. And by doing that, they can create a little bit of cover fire and expectation for the customers that are going into those journeys, right? So they'll
yeah,
they'll
100%.
they'll understand, like Simon Sinek, the why behind it, right? They'll
Hmm.
and if they I find that if people understand the why behind what you're doing, they tend to get behind what you're doing a lot easier.
100%, especially when they know the why is to help them, right? I mean, in the end, we're not trying to trick them, so it's like, how do we go help you? We're also not, we're trying to create a great experience that is, less effort than them having to call or talk to an agent, which should also be a really great thing. And so, yeah, I think, the more you can, more you can talk about that, celebrate that, promote that, the better off you are.
All right, so this one seems a little tactical and in the weeds for me, but you tell me why I'm wrong. And that's applying traditional UAT or user acceptance testing to AI rollouts.
Yeah, good one. It is a little in the weeds, but it's one of the things that, as you think about these projects, we see it. And again, this is a back to the novel nature of these capabilities. But it's also a really great way to articulate kind of the context of how to think about AI agents. Like, traditionally, software has been workflow software. How do I help a workflow? And a workflow is a sort of very specific process that is going to have, clear inputs and outputs. And they're going to execute kind of the same way every time. And while the inputs and outputs may execute the same time with an AI or the same way, with an AI agent, there may be nuances in between of how we get from the start to the end, and very similar to how you would have a conversation with a human, right? Like I have a conversation with a friend about a particular, purchasing a particular product, that person is going to have a little bit more feedback in one area versus another, or and just going to ultimately sort of converse in different ways, because you have different personalities and different thoughts and different biases and all those sorts of things. So AI can operates very much conversationally, not in a workflow. So it's going to execute the conversation conversationally. It's not going to say the same thing every time. It's not going to, sort of return the same, input or output to the same input. And so the right way to think about, kind of testing it is to start, executing real conversations through that process versus, setting up the more procedural workflow sort of testing of like, I'm going to go push this button 5 times. And every time I push that button, it better have the same 5 results. more it's about like, how do I go take real world conversations through an assistant? So we'll spend time with folks on how to go test these things. And I'll tell you that, like, it's great to have people inside of the company, test these applications because they know their products really well. And they know generally what the customer says. But when you put it in front of real customers, you get just a different nuance to the testing, just like you would with an agent. Like, you can put an agent through training and through role play conversations, but until you get into that conversation with a customer, and coach against those real conversations with customers, that's where the sort of the next level of training happens. It's the same with AI. And so what we'll do is we'll end up taking a small amount of live conversations after we've gone through some testing with the internal folks, taking maybe it's an hour's worth of conversations, looking at all those conversations, reviewing, toning, tweaking, and you'll ultimately end up learning stuff. And then you turn that volume up until you're sort of in full production. So what I tell customers often is, think about, this as training an agent. In an agent training scenario, you're going to give them all the procedures and policies and access to systems. You're going to teach them how to access those systems. You're going to teach them how to find the information that they need. And you're going to talk them through the typical calls, and you're going to role play the typical calls with them. And then the last thing you're going to do is you're going to put them on the phone with an agent that's going to take some calls. They're going to listen. And then you're going to have them take some calls, and that manager, supervisor, or lead is going to listen to them and give them coaching. You need to do the same thing with AI. And so that's just a kind of a nuance and a way of thinking. And it just helps folks that, kind of process and execute the testing to get the best possible AI agent out there.
Yeah, it sounds tactical, but really what it is, I think, is a paradigm shift.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. It's a way of thinking. Yep. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one is mismatching solution to use case. So I think the challenge here can be, do you build, do you buy, do you bundle? Do you leverage what's in the platforms, and which platform? Something that's in your CCaaS platform? Is it something that's from your ticketing platform or your CRM platform or your e-commerce platform, right? So how do you know the right tool for the right job?
Yeah. Great question. There is a lot of providers, and everybody says they provide AI and they provide AI agents. It's hard. It's hard for buyers, and I'm certainly empathetic to that. I think for us, the way we think about things is, we are a provider of technology holistically focused on delivering AI agents for customer journeys, and when we're able to focus on that, we're able to understand the nuances of those customer journeys. We understand the guardrails required. We understand the different channels and the channel aspects of those. And that can be hard for organizations to build. First of all, like, we built a lot of infrastructure to support that level of security and guardrailing. And it's more than just, go buy a model from OpenAI or Anthropic. And, it's also hard for companies that have exposure or needs to sort of go modify or make sure they maintain the capabilities of other applications. And so having the ability to really focus on this space, I think provides us a tremendous amount of advantage. It also gives our customers the ability to change some of that underlying infrastructure technology out, right? So if they, need to go to a different provider of, different capabilities that have been, traditional in a contact center, they don't necessarily have to change their AI capabilities that are supporting their customers. So it gives them a little bit of freedom of flexibility there as well. But I think it's really, we spend every waking moment and probably a few sleeping thinking about this space and building the right infrastructure to support, a large scale companies, and then giving the flexibility to support a lot of use cases is important to us as well. So there's other companies that won't give you that level of flexibility. But we built a pretty great product here where you can go in and create a lot of flexibility in the AI agents you're creating and make it really specific for your business. So that's where we tend to feel like the market is heading, and what's going to provide a great experience for the companies that deliver, consumer experiences at a high volume.
And that leads me to my last mistake, which is a self-serving one, and that is not talking to Amplix when you need to make decisions.
That's right. Yeah, I know. I think it's, listen, there is a lot of options and opportunities out there. I think there's a lot of nuances to this technology as well. And it's changing. constantly. I mean, we are we're in the arms race, arm of the technology race here. And so having a level of consultancy to support a business who, again, spends time thinking about these things, uh, I think that's a great asset that you all provide, and something that people should take advantage of 100%.
Thanks for the commercial and
You're welcome.
for accepting the bribe that I sent you.
Of course, of course.
I do want to ask you, when we were talking about the data readiness aspect of this,
Yeah.
you mentioned that you guys get involved to some extent with helping people with their data. And I'm curious, what specifically do you do and what don't you do? And I'm more interested in kind of the broader perspective, because I kind of feel like companies like yourself that are selling AI solutions probably to some extent are going to have to get into the data readiness
Hmm.
business in order to remove friction from your own sales process here.
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah.
where is that line now, and where do you see that going in the future?
Yeah, good question. And it's hard to like. I'll do my best to kind of put a cap on it, but the best thing is to for us to work with a specific company or even industry vertical. But typically what we will do is we will transform data to the best of our ability when we receive it. And we're receiving it through a lot of different methods, whether that's everything from things like ETL uploads to APIs to to processing and importing specific documents. We're going to transform it, chunk it, and use it in the way that we need to use it. What we're not going to do is go into your database and run a bunch of cleansing scripts or things like that to clean up the data inside of those systems that you as a customer can control. But again, like I said, oftentimes that isn't completely necessary. We may also run some research on your data. For example, the knowledge example that we talked about, where there's hey, we pulled in a bunch of knowledge. We're going to go run some research on it and see where it is a conflict, or where might there be potential gaps. But we may should have asked you to sort of resolve some of those gaps or resolve some of those conflicts. So it just kind of depends upon where you're at. But I think as vendors, as we move forward, as I mentioned, like since it feels like the beginning of time, or at least since I've been in this profession, which has been 26 years, there's always been data problems at enterprises, and as companies grow, those problems become more and more prolific, and systems have always evolved to handle those data nuances. And so I think the same is true with this space.
I think we're in a world today where every company, in some sense, is a data company. But
Yeah.
it seems to me like the people that are in your position, I'm already hearing it, that they're more and more and more getting into their customers' data and helping them prepare that data. And we've heard so much about the job apocalypse that AI is going to bring, and I think you're starting to hear people back off of that a little bit. But the next thing that you're hearing is the SaaS apocalypse, like
Hmm.
software as a service is going to die because of AI. And I don't know if that's true, but it's definitely going to look different in the future.
Yeah.
And one version of the future that I'm hearing about SaaS is that they're going to be about structuring your data in different ways in order to feed AI models in the future. Do you have any
Hmm.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I think, I think there are a couple of things. One, I think, potentially the structure will be better. I think also the AI tools and their ability to consume data and data nuances will get better too. And so, yeah, I mean, listen, I think it's something that's going to evolve quite a bit with the changing technology. Where it ends up, it's hard to predict. But I think both, the tooling, the AI models, and the tuning and the capabilities of AI will help us in this aspect. I think also, yeah, you're right. Like, some of the systems that are out there are going to have to get a little bit better about being AI ready, so to speak. I also think that, like, over time, AI may help us clean some of this data. As far as like, oh, like I, every time I process a claim, for example, like I'm going to go check for a duplicate account information or something, like, some of those sorts of things can be, handled with some of these new processing elements. So yeah, I think it's, like any new novel technology, like it's going to get better with time. It's going to fix the sort of thorny bits that are out there today that make it hard. That's where people are going to focus their resources, and those are the things that are going to get fixed.
All right, we're going to wrap on this
Yeah.
last question.
Sure.
What advice do you have for the people listening here that want to avoid these common mistakes?
Yeah, no, I think, we talked a little bit about it, like ask for help, ask a lot of questions. I think the other thing is, don't be afraid to go try. And again, back to you want to pick enough to have an impact, but also guard your risk. That's okay too, and and go give it a try. And I think what you'll find is a lot of the complexity can be driven out by very sort of typical kind of technology project rigor. And then also some of this new technology with AI can actually help you execute a really tight project and a really really valuable project. So get out there, ask for help. Obviously we both have organizations, Shawn, that are willing to help folks, and I think don't be afraid to dip your toe in the water here and get a project or two done, and go shout to the rooftops about the value it's driving.
Great advice. Thanks for your time and
Yeah,
expertise, Mike.
yeah. Likewise, Shawn. A great conversation. I appreciate it.